Well, tributes continue to pour in for Zambia's first democratic president, Kenneth Kaunda. Kaunda led Zambia to independence from the UK, also helped in the liberation struggle of several other East and Southern African countries, including South Africa. He died from pneumonia on Thursday, aged 97. Joseph Ochieno, a political analyst, joins me from Kampala, Uganda now. So we know that the country is in mourning. Firstly, very good to have you with us. Tell us more now about, I should imagine the high emotion is not so prevalent today. We've had time to absorb it. What's the feeling in Zambia about his legacy, and what are the aspects about him that should be remembered?
I think you're absolutely right that Kenneth Kaunda is today much more of a revered statesman than he possibly was 40 years ago. And the reason is that he's sort of the last of a generation. Now, for Zambians who thought initially that he was this dictator and who sort of took him for granted, once he organized multi-party elections in 1991, free and democratic, lost the elections, handed over power, went in the backyard and started continuing with this Africa elder statesmanship. The Zambians and very quickly the rest of Africa started seeing the real Kenneth Kaunda. But you're right in terms of the questions beyond the boundaries of Zambia. Kenneth Kaunda, Milton Obote, and indeed Julius Nyerere were the three leading African statesmen, particularly after the death of Kwame Nkrumah and Patrice Lumumba, with the workings of Oliver Tambo of South Africa, the leading campaigners for liberation struggles across Africa, and particularly in Southern Africa. So he hosted more liberation movements across Africa than any other, only next to Julius Nyerere in Tanzania. He was very much committed to anti-apartheid campaigns. And there's something else about him. While he was doing that, he also maintained a very good relationship with the British Queen and indeed the British government generally. But Kenneth Kaunda today is possibly the last of a generation.
Tell me how much of this has remained in the country. I mean, are you still seeing parts of him that people admired so much, that incredible negotiation skill? We spoke to his son yesterday and he was saying that even though he was leader, they weren't allowed to be leaders in the House. So he taught them how to be modest. Are you still seeing some of those aspects in the country?
Unfortunately, I'm worried about that, Jane, not only in Zambia, but I think across the continent. And I was saying that the last of a generation, not only in Zambia, but amongst founding independent African parents, I think it's a worry for me, and I'm very critical about this. Kenneth Kaunda was very religious, very much of a disciplinarian, the background of teaching, as you know, in terms of discipline. By and large, is it what you would find in Zambia today? Possibly not. Interestingly, the guy who took over from him, Frederick Chiluba, sort of put him in jail and rather mistreated him for the first few years before the rest of the world. And in fact, many other African leaders woke up to simply say, no, you can't treat an elder statesman like that. So by and large, while he was that, in fact, I remember one time I was a young student in Uganda when he visited Uganda in 1984, and he was in the northern town of Gulu. You know, beyond all the grandeurs, he told the Ugandans, and he was very loud and he changed tone, saying that, look, when we were fighting Idi Amin, there are people who challenged us. Those people who challenged us and looked the other way when we were fighting Idi Amin do not have the moral authority to campaign or criticize apartheid. But immediately he changed tone and said, look, you must work hard against laziness. Something along those lines. So very much of a parental elder statesman, if you like. And yes, if only Zambians could embrace slightly more of this, and indeed, if only the rest of Africa could review and reflect today and look at the lives of the Kenneth Kaunda, particularly somebody like him, going as the last of the first founding parents of the Organization of African Unity, perhaps Africa would be a very different place. Yes, South Africa, he was at the helm of it, and maybe we may be thinking today that as he passes, maybe we review ourselves both as Southern Africans, and indeed all African people of African descent around the world at these very challenging times.
I'm wondering what he thought about liberation struggles and how they played out. Obviously, the country was home to many liberation struggles and groups. I mean, I should imagine that he could have been a little disappointed in how that played out.
I think basically being a bit diplomatic there. Well, yes, he was. And in fact, Lusaka
was Saturday night.
bombed. Lusaka was bombed, indeed, bombed several times by the apartheid regime. But he did not slack. I think, but towards the end somewhere, he was rather tough with Robert Mugabe, and he played double. He was critical of Mugabe, but at the same time, it was very clear that this was his brother, if this was the kind of thing that we're trying to talk about. But beyond that, he was very conciliatory. I think one of the things that maybe Africa might learn as a lesson, now that Kaunda has gone, and we look around and simply say, who next? Maybe the likes of the Tambekis and others, may have to pick a stick of him and be slightly louder beyond the boundaries of their nation states, and slightly louder on the wider issues of human rights abuses, both within their countries and indeed across the continent, slightly more than what Kenneth Kaunda did. And yet, while Kaunda did that also, as I said, he was very careful to leave the boundaries. So if you look at some of the things that were happening in Eastern Africa, he was playing much more of a quiet diplomacy. But indeed, when it came to the wider liberation struggles, he was, together with Milton Obote and Kenneth Kaunda and Julius Nyerere, very loud. Remember, he cried the tears when Milton Obote died, and I remember that very well. When Obote died, when he said that, look, it was he who tilted the numbers when they insisted in 1971 that Obote, as their spokesperson, must go to Singapore at the Commonwealth Conference, knowing very well that Obote was going to be overthrown, partly because of being the official spokesperson for the anti-apartheid campaign. And at the time, it was Obote, Nyerere, and indeed, of course, Oliver Tambo, who was not president of the ANC of South Africa at the time, but he was seen really as the leader of South Africa. And that is something that I think these days we tend to forget.
Okay, Joseph, Ochieno, very good to talk to you. Thank you. Good evening.